He said he loved me like it meant forever until he looked at me like an inconvenience he had to explain away. One sentence tore everything apart. It wasn't heartbreak that hurt, it was humiliation. His parents decided I wasn't good enough, and he agreed without saying it. That night, something in me went still, not broken, just focused. They mistook quiet for weakness, but I'd been building power in silence all along. They wanted space. I gave them consequences. When he ended things, I didn't beg. I planned. Because by the time they realized what I'd already done, it was far too late. The night he said it, the air felt too still for the kind of chaos that sentence carried. We were sitting across from each other in that overpriced restaurant he'd insisted on: white tablecloth, crystal glasses, the faint smell of truffle oil clinging to the air like arrogance. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it. "We need a break," he started, his voice low, almost rehearsed. "My parents think you're not the right fit. They think you come from less. That was the word he chose. I watched his hand tighten around the edge of his napkin, a faint tremor in his wrist betraying what his mouth tried to make sound rational. The silence between us stretched like a blade, thin, sharp, gleaming. I didn't blink. I didn't ask him to explain. I just tilted my head slightly, studying him the way I'd studied every line in the contracts I'd signed under the name he didn't realize was mine. "That's fine," I said softly, almost kindly. Then, before his relief could register, I added, "I already fired your father from my company." His face froze, every practiced expression collapsing all at once. He blinked once, twice, the way someone does when their mind can't keep up with what's just been said. What are you talking about?" he stammered, leaning forward like he might have misheard me. But I just smiled, a small, calm thing that didn't reach my eyes, and reached for my glass of water. I took a slow sip, watching him, letting him feel the weight of every second. He'd never asked much about my work. He liked the mystery when he thought it meant I was just lucky or comfortable. He'd never connected my name, Elise Hahn, to Hahn Industries, the investment firm that had quietly bought out his father's company 2 months ago. I hadn't told him because I wanted to see who he really was without the titles. Turns out, he was exactly who I thought he'd be: charming until challenged, affectionate until embarrassed. And now, sitting across from me, he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. You're lying," he managed, his voice cracking just slightly, enough for the waiter passing by to glance over. I didn't look away. "Ask him," I said. "He signed the termination papers yesterday." The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth again, but no words came out. I could see it all unraveling in his head, the dinner invitations his father bragged about, the board meetings he'd never been invited to, the phone calls that had gone unanswered that morning. When I stood up, he reached out instinctively, as if grabbing my wrist could rewind the last 30 seconds. But I didn't flinch. "You said you needed a break," I said quietly. "So take one. You'll need it." I left the restaurant without looking back, my heels clicking against the marble in a rhythm that felt final. Outside, the night air hit my face, sharp and cool, and for the first time in months, I felt awake. The next morning, my phone didn't stop buzzing: calls from Daniel, messages from his mother, even one from his father's assistant asking for a meeting. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to talk, not yet. The revenge had only just begun, and I wanted them to feel the silence first, to feel what it's like when the person you underestimated stops waiting for you to notice her worth. By noon, news of Hahn Industries' restructuring had hit the finance feeds. His father's name appeared under executive terminations, one line buried in a list most people would skim over. But Daniel's family didn't skim. They read. They analyzed. They panicked. That evening, I went back to the office. My reflection in the glass walls looked like someone I barely recognized, collected, polished, untouchable. But inside, there was a quiet pulse of anger, steady and cold, the kind that doesn't burn out. My assistant looked up as I walked in. "You're not supposed to be here this late," she said softly. "I'm aware," I replied, setting my bag down. On my desk lay the file I'd prepared weeks ago, an acquisition plan for the real estate project his family had poured everything into. I ran my hand across the folder, feeling the embossed logo, the neat stack of contracts waiting for a signature. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, about balance, about reminding them that silence doesn't mean surrender, it means strategy. When my phone buzzed again, it was a message from Daniel. "We need to talk. Please." I didn't know about my father. I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I read it once, then again, watching the dots appear as he typed another message. "Can we meet?" "Just once. I'll explain everything." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my calendar and scheduled a meeting for 9 a.m. the next morning with his father's former business partner, the one who'd been waiting for me to make my next move. Revenge, I'd learned, didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be precise. The next morning, as the sun broke over the skyline, my assistant buzzed me. "Ms. Hahn, there's a call for you," she said. "It's from Mr. Trent, Daniel's father." I paused, letting the sound of his name hang in the air for a moment before answering. "Put him through." His voice came on, heavy and strained. "Ms. Hahn," he began, his tone stripped of the arrogance it once carried, "I believe there's been some misunderstanding regarding my position." I smiled faintly. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Trent," I said. "Your company's direction no longer aligns with our standards." There was a silence, followed by a forced chuckle. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, glancing at the document on my screen. "I'm correcting one." Daniel showed up at my office 3 days later, unannounced, wearing the kind of expression that comes after losing both pride and direction. My assistant tried to stop him, but he pushed through the glass doors like a man who'd run out of excuses. "Elise, please," he said the moment he saw me. His voice was softer than I remembered, raw at the edges. I didn't move from behind my desk. "You're not supposed to be here," I said, closing the folder I'd been reading. "I know," he said, stepping closer, "but I didn't come to fight." His suit looked wrinkled, his tie half undone, the polished image his mother had sculpted finally cracking. He stopped a few feet away from me, the silence stretching until even the faint hum of the office lights felt loud. "My father's ruined," he said quietly. "He won't eat, he won't speak. You don't understand how bad this is." I leaned back in my chair, my tone even. "I understand perfectly." He flinched, like the calmness in my voice hurt more than shouting ever could. "You think this fixes something?" he asked, searching my face. "You think humiliating my family will make you feel better?" I stood then, closing the distance between us with slow, deliberate steps. "No," I said. "But it will make things fair." His jaw tightened. "Fair," he repeated, his voice rising. "You could have told me the truth. You could have warned me." I almost laughed, but it came out as something colder. "You mean, I could have told you before you decided I wasn't enough?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. I could see the apology forming, the kind that meant nothing, the kind people use when they regret the outcome, not the choice. "You lied to me," he said finally, his voice low. "No," I said, "I tested you." He looked away then, his shoulders sinking. "My mother's blaming me," he muttered. "She says I ruined everything. She wants to meet you." That made me pause. "Meet me?" I asked. "Why?" He hesitated. "She thinks there's still a chance to fix things. She doesn't know everything yet." I studied him for a moment, watching the way his fingers fidgeted at his side. It wasn't guilt that drove him here, it was fear. "Tell her I'll meet her," I said finally. "Tomorrow. Noon." He blinked, as if he hadn't expected me to agree. "You will?" "Yes," I said. "But not here." I wrote down an address on a small piece of paper and slid it across the desk. "It's neutral ground." He looked down, recognizing the location immediately, an old private dining room at the Crescent Hotel. The same place his father once humiliated a junior partner for being late to a board dinner. The irony wasn't lost on him. The next day, I arrived first. The room was quiet, dimly lit, the kind of place that still smelled faintly of polished wood and old secrets. When the door opened, Daniel walked in with his mother behind him. She was as composed as I remembered, tailored suit, pearls, the same cold, appraising eyes she'd turned on me at every family gathering. "Miss Hahn," she greeted me with a smile that never reached her eyes. Or should I say, "Miss Hahn, CEO of Hahn Industries?" Quite a surprise. It's Elise, I said calmly, motioning for her to sit. Daniel stayed standing, as if unsure which side to take. I'll get straight to it, she began. Whatever misunderstanding occurred between our families can be resolved. My husband is unemployed, I interrupted. Her smile tightened. Temporarily. He's willing to apologize if that's what it takes. I looked at her, then at Daniel, whose eyes were fixed on the floor. You think this is about an apology? I asked quietly. She folded her hands. Everything is negotiable, Ms. Hahn. You have power. You've made your point. But let's not destroy everything over hurt feelings. I let the silence hang. You raised your son to believe people like me were a phase, I said. You taught him that status is love's currency. I'm just returning the lesson with interest. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers gripped the edge of the table. If you want revenge, take it on me, she said finally. Not him. That made Daniel look up, startled. Mother, she cut him off sharply. You made this mess. Then, turning back to me, she said, what do you want? I stood slowly, picking up the folder I'd brought with me. A signature, I said. On this. I placed the contract in front of her. She hesitated before opening it, scanning the first page, her face paling slightly. You're buying the properties under Trent Holdings? Not buying, I corrected. Acquiring. Legally and quietly. The paperwork's already prepared. Daniel stepped forward. Those properties are all we have left, he said, his voice almost breaking. That's the point, I replied. You see, I don't want your family's money. I want your legacy. I want you to watch as every symbol you built to prove you were better than me becomes mine. His mother's composure finally slipped. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Actually, I do, I said, sliding the pen toward her. Because you never apologized, you just adjusted your tone. She stared at me for a long moment before signing. No words, no arguments, just a quiet surrender that almost felt like relief. When she finished, she stood abruptly and left, brushing past her son without a glance. Daniel stayed behind, frozen in place. You didn't have to drag her into this, he said quietly. She dragged herself in years ago, I replied. You just never noticed. He sank into the chair across from me, exhausted. I didn't know she was that cruel, he said. You didn't want to know, I answered. He looked up at me, eyes tired. Are you done now? I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered the papers, sliding them neatly into my briefcase. I thought I was, I said finally. But I'm not. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Elise, please. I still don't, I said without turning. You'll only make it worse. The next morning, a new headline hit the finance world. Trent Group announces merger talks with Easton Capital. The name alone made my stomach tighten. Easton was one of my company's oldest rivals, known for playing dirty. I'd underestimated them, and she'd known exactly how to move while I was focused on revenge. My phone rang almost instantly. Ms. Hahn, my assistant said, voice tense. There's been an inquiry from Easton's legal team. They want to meet. I looked out the window, the skyline still glowing from the early light. Set it up, I said. When I walked into Easton's headquarters later that day, the air felt different, colder, calculated. The CEO, Victor Easton, was waiting in the boardroom, smiling like someone who'd already read the ending of a story I hadn't finished writing. Ms. Hahn, he said, extending his hand. I hear you've made quite an impression on the Trents. Apparently, I replied. I assume this isn't a courtesy meeting. No, he said, leaning back. Their family approached me yesterday. They're offering partnership in exchange for restoring control over their former holdings. Quite ambitious, considering what they've lost. I met his gaze. And what do you get out of it? He smiled faintly. Access. To you. The room went still. He slid a file across the table. You've made enemies, Elise. They're desperate, but I'm patient. I can either help you finish them or help them rebuild. Depends on how you want to play this. I opened the file. Inside were documents that mapped out the next phase of my own acquisition plans, information no one outside my core team should have had. My heartbeat quickened. Where did you get this? I asked. His expression didn't change. Let's just say your circle isn't as loyal as you think. I closed the folder carefully, masking the flicker of panic under control. So, he said, which side are you on? That night, I sat alone in my office long after everyone had gone. The city outside looked endless, glittering, like a lie told beautifully. On my desk, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You started this. Now finish it properly. No name, no trace. Just that line. I stared at it for a long moment before typing 2 words in reply, challenge accepted. The message stayed on my screen long after I'd locked my phone, the words echoing in my head like a dare I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I walked into Han Industries knowing it was no longer about revenge, it was survival. Someone inside had sold me out. My team looked up as I entered, their faces polite but unreadable. I scanned the room, every glance suddenly suspicious. My assistant, Mia, avoided my eyes. That was my first clue. She'd been with me for years, quiet, efficient, loyal, or so I thought. Mia, I said calmly, cancel my afternoon meetings. I'll be working from the private conference suite. She nodded, her voice too steady. Of course. I watched her walk away, her hand trembling just slightly as she typed. I already knew. By noon, I had confirmation. The digital trail led straight to her account, transfers from a corporate shell tied to Easton Capital. Victor had bought her loyalty, and she'd handed him my next move. I didn't call her out immediately. Instead, I waited. At 3, I sent her a message. Meet me in the suite. Bring everything you've been working on. When she arrived, she looked nervous, clutching her tablet like a shield. Sit down, I said. She hesitated, then obeyed. I turned the screen toward her, showing the records. Her face went pale. Elise, please, it's not what you think. I leaned forward slightly. Then tell me what I should think. Tears gathered in her eyes. He said you were planning to destroy the Trents and take him down next. He said if I helped him, no one would get hurt. I stared at her. You believed him? She nodded, barely whispering, I thought I was protecting you. The lie was too clean, too rehearsed. I stood, pacing slowly. Where is he now? She swallowed hard. He's meeting Daniel today. They're finalizing something about the merger. That word again, merger. I grabbed my coat. Delete every file he has access to, I ordered. Now, before he can use them. She hesitated. Elise, what are you going to do? I looked at her, my voice low and calm. Finish what I started. The meeting was at Easton's penthouse downtown. By the time I arrived, the boardroom lights glowed against the evening skyline. Through the glass, I saw Victor standing beside Daniel, both of them leaning over a table covered in contracts. Daniel looked uneasy, out of place in a room built on strategy and greed. When I opened the door, Victor smiled like a man who'd been expecting the interruption. Miss Han, he said smoothly. We were just discussing the future. I ignored him, turning to Daniel. You're really doing this? He looked at me, guilt shadowing his face. They're offering a way to fix what's left. To rebuild. I thought maybe you thought wrong, I said sharply. You're walking straight into their trap. Victor chuckled softly. Oh, Elise. Always assuming you're the only one in control. He slid a contract across the table. This agreement gives them back what you took, but it gives me everything else. You're impressive, but you built your empire on quiet threats. I prefer loud victories. I picked up the document, scanning it quickly. It wasn't just a merger, it was a takeover. Every asset, every holding, transferred under Easton's management once Daniel signed. And the signature line was already filled, his mother's handwriting, perfectly replicated. Forgery, I said, looking up. Bold move. Victor smiled. Who will believe you? By morning, the headlines will say Han Industries collapsed under its own arrogance. The story writes itself. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small flash drive. Then you might want to read the story I wrote first, I said, plugging it into the conference screen. The room went silent as files appeared, recordings, emails, contracts, every proof of Easton's deals with the Trents, every payment made to my assistant, every document linking his empire to bribery and fraud. You think I didn't know? I said quietly. You think I'd start a war without checking every angle? Victor's smile faded for the first time. Daniel stepped back, his face draining of color. What is this? He whispered. The truth, I said. The real reason your family fell. They didn't lose their company, they sold it. I turned to Victor. You promised them power, and in exchange, you used them to get to me. But you forgot one thing. I own the servers you tried to hack. Every word you sent went straight back to me. Victor moved toward the screen, but I stopped him with a single sentence. It's already sent to the press. His hand froze midair. You wouldn't, he said. I already did. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the lights of the city flickered through the windows, the sound of traffic rising from below, a world moving on, unaware that 3 lives had just been rewritten. Daniel's voice broke the silence. You planned this. I looked at him, calm and tired. I warned you I was precise. He stared at me, then at the collapsing mask of Victor's confidence. My family's finished, he said quietly. No, I corrected, they're exposed. That's different. I walked to the window, the city stretching out in every direction, the skyline sharp and endless. I didn't want to destroy you, Daniel. I wanted you to see me, to understand what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. He took a step closer. And now, he asked softly. I turned to him. Now I let go. By morning, the headlines told the story exactly as I'd written it. Easton Capital under investigation for fraud and collusion with former Trent executives. The market reacted instantly. Han Industries stock rose while theirs collapsed. Calls flooded in, interviews, requests for statements. I gave none. I sat in my office watching the news play on mute, the world piecing together what I'd already closed. Daniel's mother resigned from every board she held. His father issued a public statement that sounded more like surrender than apology. Victor disappeared. And Daniel? He sent one final message, you win. I read it once and deleted it. This was never about winning. It was about ending. That evening, I walked through the empty floor of my company, the glass walls reflecting a version of myself I hadn't known existed months ago. The one who'd learned that revenge wasn't fire, it was precision. Every decision, every silence, every calculated pause. I stopped by the window where the city glowed below, alive and indifferent. For the first time, it didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like closure. Nia returned the next day, pale but determined. You could have fired me, she said quietly. You didn't. I looked up from my desk. You made a mistake. Don't repeat it. She nodded, leaving a folder on my desk. Something you should see, she said. Inside were the final documents dissolving Trent Holdings completely. A signature line waited for mine. I took the pen, hesitated for just a second, then signed. The sound of it, ink meeting paper, felt like the last echo of a storm finally ending.